Welcome to the Narrative Tradition podcast. And today it's already part 3 of this very interesting topic of the Embodied Enneagram. And in this episode, Peter will share the 9 somatic patterns and neurobiology of each of the 9 Enneagram types.
Yeah, I'd like to go around the 9 types quickly
Okay.
because I think that's a lot of people are generally interested in that. Like, well, what would you say is the pattern for type 4 or type 1 or type, and we can talk about that. And of course that's a big area, so I have to be brief, but let me just go around quickly. So type 1s, we know that they're part of the body triad, 8, 9, and 1, and so there's all of us, all 3 types have a quality of standing against reality. I forget if that was Claudio's line but being against the way things are. Because we want it to be better and different, whether it's more fair or more organized or more correct or more peaceful or whatever, you know what I mean? And so that the primary emotional layer in the system there is anger. And there's a lot to say about that. But anyway, briefly. So ones, there is an issue there around anger, although, of course, if in many ones they're told that they're not allowed to be angry, they put it away. But there's, what we say about ones, there's resentment that builds up. But also there's that top-down control, right? That there's a lot of energy in the body center, but it's controlled for the right thing. So ones, of course, on their path, they have to work on loosening up because if they're controlling themselves too much, it's painful. It's tense. It's not, it doesn't allow their anyway, could go on at great length. But so ones have this quality of understanding how things can be organized. There's a primary emotional issue of anger, although it's hidden, and there's kind of a top-down control. And the diaphragm is part of that too. Type
And of
2, yeah, go ahead.
course, yeah. Well, I would like to respond to this one because
Yeah,
I have Enneagram type 1, and it has very much to do with our self-discipline as well.
right.
That give us like this tense feel because we are disciplined, and it makes us able to do what we have to do. And
Got
that
it.
gets very contracted indeed in the muscles.
Right. But the interesting thing, one of the interesting things is that the amount of body energy is not diminished. It's still there. It's redirected.
Absolutely.
You see, with some people, kind of go away from their body center and the body energy is diminished. But no, they've got the full energy, but you want to control it in a good way.
Exactly.
Which of course is great. I mean, how can we live together in a complex society unless people were like controlling themselves to some degree? But of course, the ones do that maybe too much,
Okay.
depending on, where they're coming from.
Let's move on to type 2.
Okay, so type 2, the feeling types are, yeah, by the way, the body types have basic obsessive defense, you know what I mean? In other words, they kind of, these patterns of repetition, getting on track and doing the right thing and then keeping going. Just don't try to, interrupt me while I'm doing it. The twos, now we're moving to the feeling types. Here, the primary emotional layer is grief and the avoidance of grief, because twos and also threes and fours have this amazing connectedness through the field of human relationships. And that's where they get their value and their connecting. And I mean, it's a beautiful quality with twos. And with twos, uh, they've got all these mirror neurons. And I won't go into that at length, but just to say we have neural circuits in our bodies that respond to what other people are experiencing in their bodies. And we can experience that same thing in our bodies. It's kind of like empathy in a way, related to empathy, but to some degree or another. But twos are born with enormous amounts of mirror neurons. And so 2 things we can say about twos, that they're extremely sensitive to what's happening in other people, and they move towards people. They want to connect, and they're highly responsive. So they have mirror neurons, and they're highly responsive to other people. We know that about twos, right? But you see, here's the thing: we say to the twos, well, why don't you just make a boundary, or why don't you just say no to people? Why can't you just not find out what you want? And it's like the twos are supposed to be able to do this. when their whole system is geared towards taking on what other people want, need, feel, and so on. If you can't work with, how to is going to make a boundary. I mean, that's an embodied practice, right? So we it's like, and by the way, these aspects of us are not neurotic issues. Neurobiology is not a neurotic problem. It's an existential challenge. We have to work with it and manage it, but it's not neurotic. We're not wrong for having these qualities. And the threes right next door, many of whom have similar, connectivity with people, but the threes have two things. One, they're high in their active energy. They like to have a lot of energy in the body. They generally do. They want to move and do things, and they want to move forward. And so there's this energy that's happening. And two, they're responsive to other people's expectations. Very close to two, right? And four, there's this extreme sensitivity of emotion and mood. There's a receptive feeling type quality. It's not so much going out, here, paying attention out here, but it's about taking things in. And it's a beautiful quality. And sometimes they take things in that aren't good for them. And so there's a big confusion around that. But again, body-based issue, temperament, right? And the fives, and some people know this, but not everybody understands this. Fives have a tremendously sensitive nervous system, hugely sensitive. And if that's not valued and respected and protected, what do? They just leave their bodies. They go up in their heads. Like, I'm okay, I'm out of here. It's too much. But to inhabit the body, to know how to manage this sensitivity and the potential overwhelm and intrusion that they can experience, um, to work with that, this is a path for them to be embodied. And why not be embodied? Why not live with all three centers? Fives can get pretty far in life with focus living in their head center, but why not have all three centers? And sixes are a great example of this because sixes have the most easily triggered alarm system of all the types. We have an alarm system, right, that alerts us to danger, and the response is fight, flight, or freeze. Sixes have the most sensitive alarm system. That's why, and it's been a huge survival factor, not only for the sixes and their families, but also for human communities, because they're the ones that are concentrated on possible danger and coming up with a response or a plan. And only if we understand this can we understand how sixes with completely different external behaviors land on the same Enneagram type. And this is a problem for new people learning the Enneagram, right? It's like, wait a minute, that person over there that charges ahead and challenges everybody and provokes and makes trouble and wants to work it out. And yeah, that's the same person, the same type as this other person who's like backing up and being cautious and high strung and worrying a lot. And you're telling me that these people are the same Enneagram type? Yeah, because of this fundamental neurobiological pattern. The response is different. It's counterphobic sixes you move against, they're the fight response. And the more cautious sixes, it's the flight response or sometimes freeze response. Okay. And yes, it's not all one way or the other for most people, but how can we understand sixes without understanding the neurobiology? Sevens, uh, it's several things we know, and I'm sure there's more to learn. One is they're extremely adaptable. And two, they have an enormous capacity for stimulation and experience. And that's wonderful. And of course, if they overdo that, then, there are lots of difficulties that show up. And sometimes that makes it hard to focus because there's so many wonderful, pleasurable possibilities. Their minds are so quick thinking and their bodies have this capacity for experience. And so that's the basis of their enthusiasm for life and wanting it all and tasting everything. And yeah, there's a line. There should be a limit. And sometimes the limit changes day by day, but sevens have to come to terms with finding the limit because all this stuff is so great. Why not do it more? Sevens know what I mean.
And what I learned from the sevens is also what they share, what they experience in their body. I don't know whether you recognize this, that this need to break free. That they, when they are limited, it's this, and when they're in, let's say, an unpleasant situation, or feeling that it might become unpleasant, or being in the space of an unpleasant person for them, that they need to escape. Their body needs to move away too. So it's a flight response too, but different from the sick.
Different behavior, right? Because
Well,
for the head types, the
body
primary,
experience that they need
yeah,
to escape.
right. They need to escape because, of course, it brings up fear. If I'm limited, not only will I miss out on stuff, but I'll be trapped. And if I'm trapped, then, that leads to annihilation. And so to work with that in the body is really the only, well, I won't say the only, but it's an important way of creating more room, dealing directly with that issue, because the head types, their primary emotional layer is fear and the avoidance of fear. But if sevens are not able to get to their fear, it's very hard to stay down and in, and accept some limitations without, freaking out. Eights, it's about intensity of reaction, right? And this is measurable, by the way. There's been some research on this one. The little kids that show that it's intense, and it's positive intensity or it's negative intensity, and like I want to do what I want to do, and there's a strong, assertiveness, and then an anger that comes up when people are getting in my way or trying to control me or telling me I can't do that. And God bless the parents of the eights, because knowing this, again, the eight kids are not bad. They're just full of this intensity and wanting to express this energy in life. And so to try to get them to sit still in a classroom for 6 hours a day or follow the rules all the time, they're not bad. Now, of course, they need to learn. We need to learn. I should include myself. That there are reasons why we have to kind of, manage our energy and our intensity, and if we want to get along with people in this world. But it's not because we're wrong. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I know somebody who says then, I'm just very enthusiastic.
Right. Yeah. Well, a friend of mine had a big dog. This dog was so enthusiastic. Every time I came over, it would jump up on me. It was so big that it put paws on my shoulders and look at me in the face, and then want to like get close. And it's like, okay, I didn't like that because that was too much. But the dog was completely enthusiastic. It's like the eights. They just want to kind of like, you know, I know the feeling. I just want to, sometimes I want to just grab people and love them. And,
Yeah.
anyway, I've learned some things. And then the nines are, uh, it's like calm. They know how to soothe themselves. They know how to get to calm, but they also are easily distracted. And the self-soothing and the going to the comfortable space, they have a very clever way of doing this, which is they breathe deeply into their bellies. And I realized this as a young practitioner. This was a good insight because I knew the Enneagram. I'm like, some clients would come in, they'd lie down on my table. I'd be looking at them like, okay, we're going to get some work done here. And I'd say, take some big breaths, because that's generally where we begin. They'd take some big breaths and they'd fall asleep. And I'm like, okay, I know this isn't right. What in the heck's going on? And of course, I finally realized they were taking big breaths into the belly. That's the calming breath. They weren't breathing into the chest. They were controlling and diminishing the amount of energy in their bodies. And of course, that would often make them sleepy. So it's fascinating, the different patterns. And why how some people breathe more into their chest, some people breathe more in their belly. I mean, there are different breathing patterns for the 9 types, and that's remarkable. So knowing this stuff and knowing where we hold tension in our bodies, it's different, I mean, not always different, not entirely different, but different enough that the patterns show up. And I think we need to know about that if we're working on our health and our healing.
Well, Peter, it's very interesting. everything you shared with us. The 20-minute deadline that almost made it. It's 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Okay.
Is there anything you would like to say to conclude?
I would say that we can combine the Enneagram with methods of psychological and emotional education and well-being, and also with deep healing methods. We understand this now because people are doing that all around the world. What I'm proposing, what I'm suggesting is we can do this with body-based healing methods too. And to understand the 9 type structures, we need to understand the patterns in each of our 3 centers. The patterns aren't bad, but the patterns sometimes hold us too tightly. So I think there's a great opportunity here, and it's not easy. It's sometimes scary to get into our emotions if those emotions have been held for a very long time, whether it's afraid of being angry, afraid of being sad, or afraid of being fearful. And yet, with the right approach, sometimes loud, sometimes soft, with the right support, people can learn one step at a time how to have better emotional expression and better health in their bodies.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, for sharing. This was very interesting. And I'm very, very sure for people watching and listening, been very entertaining and educational.
Okay, Jeanette, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.